And now, Focus on the Pines with your host, Jack Barnes.
Hi, my name is Jack Barnes, and welcome to Focus on the Pines, where we bring you news, views, and interesting people from in and around Ocean Pines. Our guest today is Bob Head, local resident, at least for 6 months of the year, and I met Bob at the Anglers Club, the Ocean Pines Anglers Club, where I heard him recount some fascinating stories that led to his becoming an avid fisherman in the lakes around Ocean Pines. Bob, welcome to Focus on the Pines.
Thank you very much.
And, it just amazes me that you've been fishing our local waters for 48 years. And on top of that, since 1996 or 7, I believe, Bob has kept a log of every fish he's caught, and that's over 3,600.
Correct.
So, Bob, give us a little insight of, what got you involved in this intense fishing.
Well, I was born and raised in a place called Dundalk, Maryland, which is a suburb of Baltimore. It's right by the Key Bridge. It's all water up there. And as a youngster, we went to play in the water. And my brother, who is older than I am, is an avid fisherman, and he had old, small rowboats, things like that, and we would go in the creeks and together, and he taught me how to fish. So that got us started. But we were discussing it the other day, my wife and I. We came to Ocean City probably in 1946 to come to swim, visit. Didn't fish.
Like so many of people in Ocean Pines, right?
Correct. So that's the connection that gets us here. And we started the fishing aspect of it in 1964. I was transferred to Philadelphia. My brother lived in Baltimore. Whenever he had a vacation and I had a vacation, we brought our families together, met here, and began fishing here. It became a yearly event. We had other members of our family come. We ended up renting an entire 8-unit apartment building for our families, and we fished every day. So
and that would be mostly out in the coastal bays?
Out in the coastal bays. Most of the fishing that we did was along the old railroad pilings, which used to run from where the Coast Guard station is to Old Bridge Road. And I have...
That kind of in that Stinky Beach area?
Yes, it comes out from Stinky Beach. Now, I don't know how long my brother kept records, but he kept them far longer than I did. And we would fish every year. And then we would fish 2 times a year, then we would fish 3 times a year, then we were retired and we fished together. He built a house here in Ocean Pines on Cape Town Road. I built a house next to him. So our families got to see each other and spend time together, and he and I fished together. There were pretty good catches in those days. His old logs will show I had a 7.25 pound flounder caught at Route 50 Bridge. I had what I considered was the state of Maryland record catch of a weakfish. The record is 16 pounds. I had a 20-pound one. But what happened was
Tell us about that, Bob.
Well, we were fishing at the pilings, and I caught a big weakfish, a sea trout, and I said to my brother, I got a big fish. Get the big net. Let's get him in with ease. So I brought him up to the boat. My brother dipped as deep as he could, We had an 11-pounder on my line, but he also caught in the net a 4-pounder and a 5-pounder. So that's 11 and 9. We had 20 pounds of fish, and I can't understand why the state of Maryland officials
didn't
recognize my record. So one of the things we did, if you fished these waters 45 years ago, you might have seen my brother and I out there at night. We fished at night with lights. He got lights from Sparrows Point, Bethlehem Steel. They were throwing them out. He rigged them up on his boat. We had a generator, and we would fish. And the weak fish, the sea trout, would come right up in that light, see our bait, hit it, and we would catch plenty of sea trout. There's a picture from the old coastal fishermen of me with the 11-pounder, my son with one, my 2 nephews each holding up a fish, and we reported that night we caught 26 of them.
No kidding. Boy, those days have certainly gone by the wayside.
Absolutely. The weak fish are not here as much as that, but we would catch them, fillet them, have a 8-unit apartment cookout of baked weak fish. So that's how we got started in it, and that got me fishing on a regular basis with him. My brother taught me to tie knots. He taught me how to cut bait. He taught me how to put the bait on the hooks. He taught me how to rig the rigs. He also taught me where to fish, how to watch for the birds, things of that nature. He is an excellent fisherman.
We better give him at least name credit. What's your brother's name?
We call him Captain Rick, and it's Richard Head.
Oh, Captain Rick.
Mm-hmm.
He has something that I know that he can hold over you now. Forever.
Absolutely.
Now, let's see. So we're going from you fishing the bays here, and you're out in the bays, you're in boating.
Right.
Now, I don't know if I'm skipping ahead here, but you don't fish in a boat anymore.
Hardly. It's very difficult for me to go out. On some days, I can't do it at all. On other days, I might be able to do it. But the rushing water through the inlet, and that makes the turn coming up to Route 50 bridge, that most of the time is too difficult for me to handle. And it's for 2 reasons. I had, along with my family, 2 near-death water accidents. The first took place taking my daughter in 1975 to Bethany College. She's a second generation going there. My wife and I both went there, and we were taking her up Route 88 in West Virginia, up in the Panhandle, very hilly. Unbeknownst to us, it had rained 5 inches overnight there. And we made a turn up to Route 88 going up the hill. And when we got almost to the halfway point, a flash flood came out of the hills, and we crossed that flash flood perfectly. It came out of 11 o'clock. I never saw it coming. It hit us. The front edge of a flash flood is all debris, filthy, dirty water, and it has great power to it. It covered our car in no time. I couldn't see where I was going. The windshield was covered with dirty water, and I made a critical error. I hit the brakes.
You stopped.
Stopped. And it kept us right in the flow of the water. The water built up. It got bigger and bigger. In seconds, we were picked up and cast over the right side of the road, down into a ravine that normally is 20 inches deep. It's now, they estimated, 9 feet deep.
Boy.
We rode that water down through the ravine, and again, I told you that the front edge of a flash flood is full of debris. There was a culvert at the bottom of the road. The branches, the tree stuff covered that culvert, and the flood went up over the road. It washed us up over the road, and fortunately our car stopped. 3 teenage boys came out, got my family and I out of the car, walked us out of the floodwaters, and as soon as we got out of the car, it went over the creek a second time, and this time it was destroyed. My daughter lost all the possessions she was taking to college, and the state police had to arrange for us to get back home. We had no car, nothing left, and they got us home. That was a year that the hospital was in Wheeling was wiped out with that same floodwater. But 3 years later, our county sheriff came up to our house, and I wondered what was wrong. They brought my daughter's wallet from the Ohio River. Boy Scouts were camping down there 12 miles south of the accident where we were, and they found the wallet and brought it back.
Is that right?
So that was the only
Isn't that
thing
amazing?
we reclaimed. The second thing we did that caused a great deal of anxiety for me, and as I was preparing to make the presentation to the Ocean Pines Anglers Club, my anxiety levels built back up because I try not to watch this or think about this. But I took my my two sons, son-in-law, on a trip of a lifetime, a rafting trip down the Grand Canyon. It happened to be the year of 1984, the great floods in Utah. If you remember, they had water in the streets in Salt Lake City. Well, it was the highest amount of water ever going through the Grand Canyon. We were on a rafting trip down there, and we'd go around a corner, and the guide would say, "We're going to come into some great rapids. You're going to love it." And we'd go around the corner, and there was nothing because the water was too high to interact with the boulders.
Right.
We got to a point in the trip, and there was a new rapid just caused recently. No one had very much experience, none of the guides, with this rapid and this amount of water. But we stopped the night before, camped before we went into the rapid. And it's a good thing we did, because if we'd have tried it the last thing at night, we'd have been in a great deal more difficulty. But we made an attempt the next morning, and they were going to scoot to the left and power the boats around the big curl. There was a huge curl. It had to be 20 feet high. My son and son-in-law were on the first raft to go down that day, and
What size was that raft?
they were on a small raft, 8 people.
8 person, okay.
The motor wouldn't take them around the curl. They were thrown into the curl. Fortunately, I saw them both get pushed out to the side. They were standing in the river. They were safe, and I could see they were all right. We were on a 20-person raft, huge raft. These are big things, and we had a motor. The guide was trying to keep us out of the curl going left. Couldn't do it. It took the big raft in that curl, turned it over. We went under. Everybody. Completely upside down. I don't know how long I was underwater. I don't know what I hit underwater, but I came up, and my son, my 16-year-old son, and I were within 5 feet of each other.
Wow.
Now the raft is gone. We have no idea where it is. They taught us how, in that experience, to go faster in the water to catch up with the raft, or to slow up. We went faster. We went 6 miles in that river, my son and I and others who were on that raft, without a boat.
Oh boy, that must have been.
After 6 miles, we caught up with the boat. My son and I were the first to climb on it. It was upside down. The motor was useless. We pulled the guide in. He had a broken leg. We caught other people along the route. We went 6 additional miles in the Grand Canyon on an upside down raft, saving people. We got pushed over to the side in a whirlpool. My son and I tied the raft to rocks, and we found food containers, and one of them was a loaf of bread, and they were wet slices of bread, but we toasted the bread on rocks.
No kidding.
Hot rocks. They're hot as could be down there during the daytime and cold as could be at night. But we cooked them and we ate that. 12 hours later, helicopters came in and rescued us out, pulled us out. But it was still gut-wrenching, and I can still not watch whitewater rafting on television, and I had a great deal of trouble reading Deliverance.
I bet you did, and certainly explains why going out in a boat with their currents around inlet underneath the 50 bridge could be something maybe that just doesn't become enjoyable anymore.
It does not. Yeah, that's for sure. It does not.
Now, do we transition? That's the reason you suddenly started looking at fishing the lakes around Ocean Pines.
Absolutely. I love fishing. I hated to give it up, and I started. And I began at the big lake at the South Gate. I got out of that lake early on almost a 7-pound, 22-inch bass. And that was the largest I ever caught. So I began fishing on a regular basis the South Gate. And that wasn't too good. I only caught 59 more bass in that lake.
What year about are we here, roughly?
1996.
That's 1996, okay.
Yes. The Grand Canyon incident was 1984.
Okay.
So 1996 I began fishing in the South Gate. Didn't like that lake at all. I don't like the water in it, the water quality. Then I found a lake up behind the Ocean Pines Plaza. And it was a beautiful lake, full of lily pads, but great fish. And I caught a number of fish up there. I would have to check my notes. I can't remember how many. But it was in about the 70 or 80 fish. And one day I'm up there fishing, and a little storm came by, and I knew it was going to be short lasting. Left my rod and reel sitting beside the lake with a minnow on the end of my line in the water trying to protect him. It rained for about 10 minutes, and the rain stopped. I got out of the car, went over, picked up my rod and reel, and there was a big snake. He had swallowed my minnow, and I now have a snake on the line. I cut him off and got rid of him real quickly. One of the other lakes I fished, and I got 605 bass out of it, was the little lake called Bainbridge, up on the north end of Ocean Pines. It's not a very big lake, very small indeed, but most of the fish I got out of there were the 10 to 12 inch size. And I caught 605 bass there over the years. The largest I got out of there was an 18-incher. And that was enjoyable and pleasurable. Then I found a place called Calvin Gumm's Farm.
Oh, we got to be careful here, boy. We're letting this information out.
This is a secret place. It was a gorgeous lake. Hardly anyone fished it. It was as clear as could be. You could watch the action of the fish. You could see what they were doing. And I learned so much about fishing at that particular lake because of the clarity of the water and the beauty of the water. It was a tremendously good lake. When I began fishing it, I noticed that one time there were started to be a lot of beer cans and cigarette butts in the lake.
And this was a lake that you had asked the owners permission.
Had owner's permission. Had a little boat there with an electric motor. And one day I see there's a strange boat in the lake. And this is, like I say, a pristine lake. I go up and ask the guys fishing there who gave them permission to fish. They said Calvin Gumm is, and that proved that they had gotten permission from the right guy. I asked them if they happened to be the ones who were throwing cigarette butts and beer cans around the lake. One guy says to me, "I hardly think so. I'm the minister at the Mennonite church down on Route 50. So we cleared him. But I caught 937 bass in that lake in a 4-month period. I learned a couple of lessons out of watching the fish there.
Before you do that, just show me that, because we keep bringing up these numbers. Show that logbook, and you have basically kept a record of over 3,600. I won't say bass, I'll say fish, because you record everything you catch.
No, the count I give you of 3,609 is only bass.
Oh, that's only bass.
Yeah, I do not.
That is absolutely amazing.
Do not keep I keep the other records, and I summarize them at the end of the year.
Just a minute.
I send a summary to my fishing friends on the internet.
That's amazing.
At the end of every year.
Is that right?
Yeah.
I don't know anybody that keeps a log of that many fish.
Well, it's a good thing to do. It's a very good thing to do.
Now, you were talking about
At Calvin Gums Lake.
Right.
A couple of things I learned there. One was that bass miss the bait at least 30% of the time. They miss the lure, and I used every lure in my box and caught bass on every lure up there. They miss minnows. When we fish with minnows a great deal because bass love minnows. A bass will come up to, and I would watch this, come up to make a strike on a minnow, and the minnow would dart left, right, up, down, leave the water, get out of the way of the bass, and the bass would miss him. The bass would frequently come back and maybe get him on the second or third turn. And another thing that I learned there was that you see bass pros talk about bass love structure, and they do. They love holes, humps, stumps, reeds, trees, whatever, and they'll hide in it. But they also circumnavigate is the word I want, the lake. And I watched them go around the lake. And Jack, I could never figure out, some days they would go counterclockwise, other days they would go clockwise. And they would be 2 to 3 feet off the shore. And they would cruise around and trap bait fish between them and the shore. I've watched bass chase bait fish all the way up till the shore that they ran out of water.
No kidding.
So unbelievable the things that you saw and did up there. Now, Mr. Gum died 4 months later after I began fishing there, and we lost access to the lake, so I didn't get to fish there anymore. And that's when I started fishing what I call Southgate 2. Mm-hmm. And when we were talking at the library, I told the guys if they went out the library road, Cathell Road, turned left, went 100 yards, turned left again. There was a little parking place there, enough for 4 or 5 cars, and a gorgeous lake back there. But no one fished it because it's hard to fish. And it has...
Hard in what way, Bob?
If you fish the big lake at the Southgate, there are very few trees around it. You can cast with ease. At Southgate 2, there are only about 10 places in the lake that are vacated with trees. And one time we got the Ocean Pines Public Works to come in there and cut these spots in there so we could fish. And they did it for us. And it helped a great deal. And they'll come once a year, cut down the brush in there so it's easier to fish. But it's still a tough lake to fish. The grasses in it are very, very difficult. Once you get to July, the grasses make it almost impossible to fish there. But we figured out ways of fishing there. And we would drag minnows across the bottom. We would fish with bobbers and very short leads so that the minnows couldn't hide in there. Now let me check a note. Okay. I think I had, at this lake, I think we had 1,750 bass caught there.
I just can't. I can't process.
And my fishing buddies, Jake has a 22-incher out of that lake. Gary has a 21-incher, and my largest is 20-inch out of there. Now, I also keep records of other things we catch there, and I caught in that lake. Pickerel, black crappie, white crappie, catfish, bluegill, snapping turtles, eastern paint turtles. I caught a giant bullfrog one year, and I had an unusual catch this particular year in that I caught a bass and he ran towards the shore and the bank, got under the bank and kept himself in there. I kept my line as taut as I could, and it took about 40 seconds, maybe 50 seconds, and that bass came out of there like a shot, and I looked down and he had a snapping turtle hooked to his tail.
No kidding.
So he was escaping the snapping turtle. And it was an unusual catch. And I was standing on the bank of that lake one day, and I heard people talk about how many eels were in the lake, but I never saw one until this particular day. An eel came right along the shoreline. He was as big as my arm with a head as big as my hand. I was looking down watching him, Jack, and not paying attention where I stepped. I fell into the lake.
Oh, jeez.
Caught myself on a root with my left arm and ended up tearing my rotator cuff. Couldn't play golf for a year. And one of my golfing friends says to me, "Bob, how deep was the water where you fell in?" And I said, "About 3 feet." He says, "Why didn't you just fall in, stand up like you said, and just climb back out?" And I said to him, that assumed I had a working brain.
And which a lot of us have when we get in those situations. It's always easy to look back.
So that was part of the story then, that I tore my rotator cuff in the lake. So
I think that's really fascinating, listening to your stories, how you ended up fishing in the local, basically our local waters, because of a couple really dire circumstances.
Yes.
That you're just not about to go out there and current anymore. I can appreciate that. And I really appreciate you sharing your stories. I thought it was interesting. You have a unique way of telling the story.
Thank you.
And you go back a long ways in Ocean Pines, even though you're doing a Coshocton, Ohio thing every once in a while, which we all understand because of our connection to our families. That's
where the kids are, and that's where we go even in the winter.
Well, that's great. Well, thank you again for sharing your stories. I think it's been fascinating, and I hope that all the viewers out there have enjoyed listening. I'm sure they had. And we want to thank you all for joining us here today. This is Jack Barnes for Focus on the Pines.